Thank you all for joining today. Good afternoon. Hi, welcome to the Leadership Academy Communities of Practice. I am your host, facilitator, Robin Freeman. I'm with the University of Arkansas Currents in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So we're glad everyone was able to join to get on today. I apologize. I think I was playing around with the calendar invite on Monday, and somehow the others sent out a notice that it was canceled. So when Peggy told me and a couple others told me, hey, you canceled the meeting, I'm like, no, I didn't. Until more people were like, hey, you canceled the meeting. So I apologize for that. Glad you're able to get in spite of my scheduling snafu. We're excited to have you on today. We're going to open up with the roll call and see who's here. Keep in mind we are recording today's session, and I will send out the link to the recording and post it on our Project E3 website, so you'll have access to that. And so we'll start trying to go in alphabetical order by state. So I'll call the state, and if you're here representing that particular community, please let us know. So first up is California. All right, we don't hear anyone. What about Illinois?
Illinois is present. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Kentucky.
Christina Bard with the E3 project partners at the University of Kentucky.
Hello.
And I'm also at the University of Kentucky, Patty Logston.
Good to have you on. And next is Louisiana.
Sue Hayes with Louisiana Rehabilitation Services Counselor.
Hi, Sue.
Hello, Ms. Bob.
Megan Coleman-Watkin with Crescent Care in New Orleans.
Great, thank you for joining. Anyone else from Louisiana? Next.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Flower Benton.
I'm here.
Good to have you. Next is Montana.
Hi.
Hello. We have New Hampshire next. What about New Jersey?
Hi, this is Elaine Katz. I'm here from New Jersey representing Kessler Foundation.
Thanks for being on. And next is New Mexico. All right, we have North Carolina.
Beth Newcomb, it's North Carolina Rocky Mount Vocational Rehabilitation.
Hello. And Oregon.
Oregon, Jane Hagel,
Hey,
Medford Commission, or Oregon Commission for the Blind.
hello.
And Sarah Claydra, also Oregon Commission for the Blind, Voc Rehab Counselor.
Thanks for being on today. Next is South Carolina. And we have Virginia.
This is David Leon with Virginia DARS.
Hi, David.
And Nate Mahanes with Virginia DARS.
Hello.
David.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
And finally, our partners.
Hey, it's DJ Ralston with E3, and I noticed Yohance Goodrich is also on from Virginia. So Yohance got you covered. Thanks, man.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thanks for being on. Anyone else that I missed their state or joined late would like to let us know you're on? Go right ahead. All right, hearing none. One from California is Mr. Holland. So thank you for joining us. We have first up a presentation from Dr. Sagacious, I hope I'm saying your name right, Livingston. And Dr. Livingston is going to be sharing some great information with us today about expanding employment opportunities for our target populations and sharing the power of how we need to shift our perspectives. So we're going to be entering into a discussion about entrepreneurship as a workforce opportunity for individuals with disabilities, and how we can make room for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Livingston, originally from Chicago, she is the founder of the organization Infamous Mothers, LLC, and she is also an author. So we're going to, she's a sought after speaker, much sought after speaker. So we're excited to have her on today and share her expertise. Looking forward to having this discussion. So we're going to turn it over to Dr. Livingston to lead us off in this discussion. Again, just keep in mind that we are recording today. If you haven't already, to be sure and mute. We'll have time afterwards if you would like to have a discussion and ask questions. Dr. Livingston.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for making space for me and allowing me to join you all today. I'm really honored. I'm humbled. I never take these opportunities and moments for granted because of all the millions of people in the world. You all could have chosen anyone. And so I am always appreciative when I am invited to share information and to learn with a community of people. And I always, wherever I go, I always begin a session by setting an intention, because for one, it allows me to readjust myself from whatever it is that I just whirled in from. It allows me to connect with the people that I'm in the room with, and it allows me to, and it allows you all to kind of get an idea of where we're going with whatever we're doing in that moment, right? And so today, I am inviting the group to set an intention with me that honors and celebrates people who have made room for you to be where you are today, right? And the way that I often do this is when we're in larger spaces or in person, is I ask people to take about 30 seconds to honor and celebrate in your mind one person or two people who have who is our focus in this moment. And then after those 30 seconds, I ask you to just start naming those people and to just throw them out into the circle. And then from there, I usually enter into whatever it is that I'm presenting in that day. And so in that way, it's a way to stay humble. It's a way to be reminded there are people who have come before us. And it's a way to bring all of those people in conversation with us and have them sit next to us as we do the work that we set out to do. So are you all okay with that? All right, I see some heads nodding. Perfect. Okay, so today I am inviting you all to think about people who have come into your life, who have made room for you to be where you are today, people who have held space, people who have trailblazed, people who have made sacrifices so that you wouldn't have to, so that you will have to make a different set of sacrifices, people whose backs became the bridges that you and others have walked across, people who have innovated. All right, I'm asking you to think about those people for the next 15 to 30 seconds, and then I'm going to ask you to throw those names out there.
Unmuted, throw the names out there.
So we're going to unmute briefly to throw the names out, and then we're going to mute back.
Maya Angelou.
Yes. So for me, I would like to center the story and the voice of my mother and my grandma. Carol Larry and Winifred Ledbetter. And you all don't have to raise your hands, just throw them out there.
My mother, Mary Douglas.
Yes.
My mother, Marguerite Bordebeau, and my father, Louis Leo Bobar.
An EOP counselor by the name of Michael Dacco.
Yes.
I would like to add our former director, Robin's predecessor, Jean Miller.
Yes. Let's get about 2 more, and then we can transition.
So one of my
You were breaking up, Dr. Susan.
Dr.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Carlos Washington. He was a professor in my master's course.
Yes. Let's get one more.
Richard Friedman, a vocational rehabilitation counselor out of the Seacoast.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for that. We can all mute, and I'll give you time to do that. I've explained to you why that's always important to me, that practice starts anything that I do. One piece I did not add to that is, I think that in the hustle and bustle of our own lives, this practice allows us to remember that we are part of a continuum, right? And the idea that people have made room for us, and the idea of at some point, and in the work that we're doing, we're often making room for other people. But often we are able to get caught up in the work that comes with it. And rarely do we have spaces, in professional spaces, that allow us to sit back and to just kind of decompress and to create room for acknowledgement. And I think that's so important. And so with that, I want to ask you all, I want to transition to another piece of acknowledgement. My approach is, so I have my expertise, I have my degrees, I have my experience, I have all of these things, but those things often do not serve you if I'm coming from a place, if I'm coming from left field and you all are coming from someplace else. So I try to understand what's important to you all, and I try to understand what's already being done, so that I can be nimble in my presentation and my approach, and so that the work can be as relevant and as practical and as informative as possible. So before I go into what I've prepared based on the research and the questions that I've asked people who are connected to your work, I want to just ask you all, from all the different places where you all are, I hear you're from California, Montana, Louisiana. What are you all currently doing to support entrepreneurship in your agencies and your programs? Are you all currently doing work around supporting entrepreneurs in your agencies and programs? So let me get some feedback about that, and then I will know how to adjust if need be as I go forward.
Well, this is David. I'll share. In Virginia, VR, we do help clients with self-employment goals. In addition to that, last spring, we were part of a pilot through Adult Ed on an 8-hour financial empowerment specifically geared towards entrepreneurship. And we will be piloting the revised version of that this fall as it moves to a virtual. So we are doing work related to individual plans for employment when their goals are around this. And we are also working on it from a financial capability, financial empowerment place as well to make sure that the individuals whose goals center around entrepreneurship also have the financial literacy skills to successfully navigate all the other pieces of being an entrepreneur. Although I know that we have two other folks who can maybe speak even more on how that works with our clients.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is there anybody who's not doing any work around entrepreneurship?
This is Megan from Crescent Care, which is a health clinic in New Orleans. We don't have an established employment services program. We're trying to put it together, but this is a town where basically a lot of folks are interacting with the economy in a non-traditional way. So I'm trying to figure out from the community what folks might need in order to legitimize their hustle, basically, in terms of like, what information do they need to know about how to access capital, business planning, you know, like anything really.
I didn't hear.
Dr. Livingston, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm interested in getting a sense of what you, so we can get one more person to kind of, so I can get a sense of the temperature. Can you all, one or two more people to tell us what's happening in your state around entrepreneurship?
I can speak to California. We've had self-employment as one of the methods for people going back to work for many, many, many years. But I do think that it's been historically underutilized because some of our procedures really have been looking, it's kind of built around like an old traditional self-employment. And we've been having the discussion lately about needing to update our, the way we're looking at employment and entrepreneurship. And it's different now than it was, 15, 20 years ago. And we recognize the need to look at it differently and try to support the endeavors more. Where I happen to live, we do a lot of self-employment plans for farming and agriculture. That's where I live. We do a lot in that respect, but we haven't quite yet grasped other industries for the self-employment. So we have some work to do.
Okay. So that gives me enough. You all have given me enough feedback that lets me know if there's a range of information in the room. And so there are places where I will keep going with what I've prepared. There are places where I will tweak. And then there are places where I will invite questions at the end for us to think about based on some of the things that you all have shared in this short feedback session. So with that said, I come from a literature background. And so for me, story is very integral to a lot of the teaching, a lot of presenting that I do. I think people are able to remember the pictures that we often create in their head through stories. And I think it allows us to create an emotional bond with material that can often help us remember. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of information about my journey as an entrepreneur, where it came from, how that happened, talk about entrepreneurs that I've encountered, and then have a couple of plot twists that will lead us to VR. So I'm just want to give you all that foreshadowing. So I became an entrepreneur because of a matter of ethics. My research was focusing on women who were often not in the classroom. And so women who are marginalized mothers. And I was interested in, as a grad student, I participated in a research cohort or in an ethics cohort that really got me thinking, what does it mean for me to conduct research where one day I will be able to buy a house and purchase a car and put my children through college. And yet the very people who the research was created for would never benefit from it because they are not part of the population that I often teach or that are often present in the classroom. And so it was important for me that I created or transformed or repackaged the work that I had dedicated my life to doing and brought that package to the people that the work was actually created for and with those people in mind. The second piece is I had a son who was struggling in school and he was misbehaving. And I was worried that he would find himself, Wisconsin is known to be connected with the school to prison pipeline. And I was concerned that my son who was struggling in school will somehow be in that system, right? And I kept having this vision. I kept seeing myself standing at the chalkboard, educating youth at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, giving them the very best that I had to offer of myself, and my son somehow being dragged away to jail. And I'll give you, and I will go there in a second. I would explain to you what was going on with my son because it's relevant. And then I imagine myself crossing the stage as a graduate with my PhD, and my son, because he's a very vocal kid, saying, yeah, here she is with a PhD in English and I can't read, right? And so the horror of those two visions made me say, Sagacious, as much as you love being in the academy, you have to switch and you have to find a way to bring this work. You have to find a way to raise your children, educate your child, and also earn a sustainable living. As it turns out, my son is dyslexic, and he had been in the school system for a very long time. He had been tested for everything, and he was placed in a classroom where they'd identified that he had a reading disability, but the reading disability that he had was not, the needs were not being met. His needs were not being met because teachers are often trained to identify a disability, but they're often are not trained to name the disability. And so they can't provide resources and programming that helps to address the disability. So he was in a classroom of general reading disabilities. And what would happen is he would get up when it was time, because he's smart, he would get up, and when it was time for him to read, and start creating chaos in the classroom. And so what he was told, and what I was told, is that by the time he made it to 5th grade, if he kept doing that, they wouldn't, because in the Madison school districts, you're not allowed to touch youth. They would have to call the police, and they would start carting him off to jail, and I would have to pick him up from there. And so knowing about the school to prison pipeline, I switched and said I would start homeschooling him. I share that because I had to figure out how I had abandoned my dream of becoming a professor, and I had to figure out how to earn a sustainable living. And so I took the work that I was doing quietly, because you don't leave the PhD world to start, you don't completely leave the PhD world to start a business. It's often unheard of. And it defeats the purpose for many of becoming, of earning a PhD. I took that work, repackaged it, started a company called Infamous Mothers, which was based on the concept that was created throughout my PhD work. And I think this is one of the reasons why I was invited to connect with this call today. The work that I do with Infamous Mothers is we focus on, the research asks, can marginalized women who come from stigma be real change agents in our society? So can people who are single moms, people who are recovering addicts, people who are what folks often refer to as baby mamas, people who are survivors of rape and sexual trauma, people living with mental illness, people living with HIV and AIDS, can these people be seen as folks who are change agents in society? In literature, we're often seeing these people as folks who at the end of the story that we have access to, the end of the novel, the end of the memoir, the end of the poem, the end of whatever, we often see redemption for them. But rarely do we see these stories end with folks shifting, changing, influencing society, or saving the day. They are usually not the heroes, and they're usually not the heroines. And I want to stress that I am talking particularly about mothers in this context. And of course, this is a whole PhD dissertation, and so I won't go into all the details, but I will point out one thing. What I found is that these folks are often not chosen to be the heroines or the heroes, because in our society, women are often put in situations where we have to choose between being women and being mothers. And as women, right, even if we are professionals, there's always the question mark around our heads about, okay, while you're here, what's going on with your kids? And so we can be heroes in the domestic sphere, but often we can't be heroes in public, right? There's often a scrutiny that comes with that. And so if you are a single mom or recovering addict or someone living with a disability or someone surviving domestic abuse, well, that scrutiny becomes even tighter. If you don't believe me, just start thinking in your head about the number of people who you know who may qualify as infamous mothers, who are CEOs, politicians, medical doctors, attorneys, single moms, divorcees, single moms who are not divorcees, baby mamas. Think about those folks in your life and ask me if they are more of the rule, the exception, or the unicorn, right? So the infamous mothers concept comes from this idea that people or women who birth children from circumstances that society often judge as immoral or not good are often people who are not seen as folks who make an impact on our society. And what I, in my work, focus on is the idea that we are more than our circumstances. The narrative that is often constructed for us and around us is that we're either the charity cases, and this is very important because I want you all to think about this foundation and framework as we transition to the work that you all do. We're either the charity cases or we're the super strong women. We are either problems who need to be solved, and we are rarely the problem solvers. This leads me to the infamous Mother's Coffee Table book. In the infamous Mother's Coffee Table book, we collected 19 stories about women who had gone through the belly of hell and brought something good back. But the unexpected discovery was that over 60% of the women in that book had tried entrepreneurship. And I want to stress that part to you. The idea that we set out to tell one set of stories, but what we discovered is that and that's being conservative, over 60% of the women in a book that was designed and that focused on women who had gone through the belly of hell, whether they were born or raised or birthed children under circumstances that for them were less than ideal, and they somehow come out on the end as change agents in their community and influencers. Over 60% of those women had tried entrepreneurships. And they were women who were solving problems in their communities, either through daycare, through cleaning service, through educational training programs that they had designed and developed, through providing products and services that were meant to improve self-esteem and self-worth, or through creating catering companies. And what I also want to point out is that the majority of these women were people who were living with some kind of disability, whether it was women living with bipolar disorder, ADHD, PTSD, dyslexia, acute anxiety, or depression. These were kind of the unexpected, unintended results of work that was never meant to be about these things. While some of these women succeeded, many failed in their business endeavors. And when asked why they failed, they named the following reasons: lack of support, lack of information, lack of capital. Rarely did they say it was a lack of will or commitment or grit, or that they had changed their minds. This leads me to the make room concept. The make room concept comes from Sheryl Sandberg's idea of leaning in. And it's In her work, she talked a lot, and she's revised it since she first came out with it some years ago, but it's the idea that women have to do more work to have a seat at the table. And the response of this work is that women have been leaning in. There are segments and populations of women who have been leaning in forever, but people struggle to make room for them. The second place where this concept of making room comes from is my own experience with walking into my graduate program, sitting down, going to a meeting in my graduate program, sitting down in this room filled with other students, and a woman sees me come in the room. She smiles, because the people in the Midwest are known for just being very nice and very, what do people call the Midwest nice? So she sees me, she smiles, she makes room, she scoots over. And then my daughter comes in. So then she scoots over again. Then my next daughter comes in, then she scoots over again. And by the time my third child comes in, she's frustrated, she's confused, she's wondering, how much room do I have to make for this woman? Well, needless to say, and I have not said, I have 6 children. So you can imagine the level of movement that this woman would have had to go through had those other children been born at the time. And this makes me think about, what does it mean for us to make room professionally? Well, let me just stop at professional. For what does it mean for us as we talk about entrepreneurship within our agencies and our communities for people who are living with disabilities? What does that making room concept look like? How many seats will we have to move over before we're able to say, this is something that we can actually do, right? I want to give you all a quick overview about what my journey has been about as an entrepreneur. It's been a journey that's been filled with mansplaining. People have often, the gatekeepers of the old guard, when we think about business, are often men. When I go into the world, and this is something that threw me off. I want to stress this, because coming from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, in my particular department as a PhD student, at the time, I got a lot of support from my male professors, from my community. We worked as a unit. And so once I got into the business world, it's a very different environment that I was not prepared for. It was scary, it was intimidating, it was overwhelming. And so I got a lot of mansplaining, a lot of people breaking concepts down to me, explaining things in ways that was very condescending. I got a lot of people who would never acknowledge my company as a company, but as a project, right? I would go into spaces and they would tell me, oh, tell me about your project, even though I had been an official LLC. I had a lot of people telling me that as a woman who had already earned a PhD, I should stop what I'm doing for the sake of the kids so I can provide something a little bit more stable and sustainable, even though the work that I was doing was all about providing something for my children, right? And that's why I started with telling you the story about my son. And then I got a lot of people invited me to turn my work into a nonprofit, because women, especially Black women, especially Black mothers, are expected to serve and work for free because that's noble, versus respecting that I was running a for-profit company. Because I'm not expected to earn money, even though I'm often stigmatized as a single mom of 6. People have ideas in their head about what I'm already, what I am, or what I should be doing, or the story and the narrative around a woman who's a single mom of 6, right? And so there are these contradictions, there are these commonplace notions and beliefs that play out that made my journey as an entrepreneur very challenging. Another piece that I've experienced, and then again, I want you all to keep these in mind because I'm bringing this back to VR in a second. People struggle to see the vision of my work because of who it came from. It was okay when I was telling a story about women going through the belly of hell, but once I got to the part of us bringing something good back, folks struggled. Once I started explaining, no, this company acknowledges where women, where the niche population of women I work with have come from. But we are a media technology and programming company. People struggled to imagine someone who looked like me as someone who was designing technology and running programming that was highly based on accessing technology platforms. So for instance, last month, we hosted an online conference that with 227 participants. This conference had been in place 2 years before it actually launched, which was last month, 2 years before COVID. But prior to COVID, people had a hard time supporting this idea of an online conference, right? We had a hard time getting sponsorships. We had a hard time getting support. But once COVID hit, folks were forced to have to come to where we were to understand what does it mean to offer an alternative to large face-to-face gatherings, right? Why am I telling you this? Because as a Black mom who is single with 6 children, can you imagine how difficult my journey as an entrepreneur had have been if they'd also known about the 2 invisible disabilities that I live with? How much of a challenge, how much of, are you sure you can do this, if people had known about the disabilities that I actually live with? So this is where you come in. As someone living with invisible disabilities, as someone who has founded a company, established a foundation for it, made it sustainable while also mothering 6 children as a single parent, I wonder if I'd been able to go to the field of vocational rehab for help. I can't say for certain because prior to encountering the work of Project E3 and being in negotiation with Southern University to pilot programming for the Louisiana sites, I had no idea this field even existed. Keep in mind that I am a woman with a PhD who comes from a place where this work is happening, and I had no idea that you all do the work that you do. I had no idea that this is something that was a possible option for me. Keep in mind that I'm also very vocal about my disabilities, but not once has anyone pointed me to you. And so even without help that really could have benefited and moved my work along, the infamous Mother's brand was able to, last month during the pandemic, be invoiced by 43 vendors and contractors, mainly mothers, for work that they've done. And we're currently able to contract with 6 other vendors, offering them steady employment during these uncertain times. So why am I telling you this? For several reasons. For one, to offer proof of concept, right? To say that there are people like me with multiple invisible disabilities who are thriving in business, right? But I'm sure you already know that. To invite you to wonder how many people are actually doing the work without the benefit of VR services and thriving today, but struggled exponentially because they didn't know you existed, right? And how much could their life have been impacted by that knowledge? I'm also bringing up these points because I'm sure you already know that people with disabilities are solving workforce problems every day, their own and others, through the companies that they're creating. My question is, what can we do to expand the ways in which VR helps make that possible? And then the final thing I want to invite you all to think about together is, what does it look like in a world where COVID-19 exists and workforce development as well as business is changing? Is this not a perfect opportunity for us to reconsider the idea that we have to establish new possibilities for folks who it will be unsafe and highly risky to enter back into the workforce as we know it, right? And so that is essentially what I have for you all today. And I am inviting any kind of questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Dr. Livingston. That's a powerful story, powerful information. Do we have any questions from our participants today for Dr. Livingston? Questions or comments?
I have a question. This is Peggy. Dr. Livingston, what assistance could VR give you that would have helped you in your success? Do you know? Are you familiar with the help that VR gives?
So I've been learning a lot as we go through this process. But if I were to come to a VR office, one of the things that I would have hoped is that it would have been the one place that I could have gone and people would have been, the people who I come into contact with, would have first believed that I was able to do the thing that I said I was able to do. Two, would have helped me develop a plan, because my invisible disability makes it hard for me to manage details and to manage things in a way that I can see the vision, but it's hard for me to create the plan and a strategy, right? I need intensive work around that. And so I would have needed someone to help me come up with a plan and a strategy. And the third thing I think I would have needed is I would have needed people to not just support the vision, but to recognize that I am the expert on my capabilities and to trust me when I say, here are the things that I need, how can we build this out, versus what I actually experience. Well, do you really need that? Or are you sure you understand? Or are you, right? I would have needed to go to a place that felt safe. That would have been, I think that's the gist of what I'm getting at. And then someone, once I'm in that safe place, someone who trusts and who is a collaborator with me to help me build out a plan. That's with my particular disability.
Thank you. That's great. That's helpful.
Thank you, Peggy, for the question. We have time for one more question if anyone else wants to chime in or join the discussion.
Dr. Livingston, this is John Walsh with Southern University. Thank you for this presentation. I was reading an article by Dr. Ibsen this morning about VR outcomes and how many outcomes there are in self-employment. And actually the numbers are quite low when we look at the total. I believe about 5.3% of successful outcomes where someone is in a position or has their own business were in rural areas. But if you look outside of rural areas, the numbers drop significantly to about 2% of all successful outcomes. And when we talk about successful outcomes, being employed or running your own business. So your presentation is so timely for me because, as a matter of fact, DJ Ralston and I just had a conversation this morning on this topic and how there really is more of a space needed for promoting more micro enterprises, self-employment, entrepreneurship for individuals with disabilities. So there's my comment. My question is, as you took this journey, who were some of the folks that were helpful as you made that shift from academia to entrepreneurship? Was there anyone that stood out or any organization that stood out that really was there to assist you or to kind of guide you in the right direction?
Yeah, so I can tell you that prior to getting, I'm going to answer your question by telling you several places I went that didn't help, and then how this place became a oasis and a beautiful support after experiencing so much trauma trying to get the work off the ground. So I went to organizations that were designed for women and minorities in business, and they often were not helpful. I went to places where I went to professors who were in business, and they often were not helpful. I went to other women who were entrepreneurs, and initially those women were not helpful. And then part of it, to be very quick, part of it is the design and the climate around entrepreneurship and business. Part of it is the idea that people are often trained to support certain kind of business, but I was coming from a place, I was coming from this very abstract concept, trying to turn it into, so I wasn't trying to open up a restaurant, for instance, right? And so folks didn't know what to do with me. And so they kind of carted me away. And so then I finally ran into an organization that focused on women, and the founder just happened to be a woman who had a background very similar to mine, who was also a PhD, who had taken her abstract idea and turned it into a successful business. And so I lucked up by finding someone with an experience that looked a lot like mine, who had gone through the journey and who was able to mentor me.
But it took quite a bit of persistence to finally arrive at that. So I could see the journey has been at times arduous, but
yes. Yes.
And I guess that's a key takeaway for us is we who are in the vocational rehabilitation space probably want to look at, and I know Araceli had mentioned this too, you know, look at what are our policies and practices within VR agencies. We don't want to make it inadvertently more arduous than it should be for folks who want to go into entrepreneurship, and what can we do to support, which is clearly, I think, going to be the next phase of our economy, is more entrepreneurship and more folks getting into the gig economy. So I appreciate you opening that space for us to think about that.
Yes, thank you. And I think one thing I want to add to that very quickly is, so the Infamous Mothers brand became about focusing on marginalized populations and helping them build businesses and grow professionally, in part because of my own experience with the question that you just asked, John, like, what was my journey like? Who were my supporters? And so instead of asking people to reinvent the wheel, the Infamous Mothers brand was about creating a system and leaving breadcrumbs so that folks can have a much less pain, a much more painless process, go through a much more painless process, and to have support around them. And so I think what we've done and what we've created looks a little different than what we usually see out there, because it's the recognition that very few of us actually make it to this pathway, to your point, John. And so what does it look like when it's not the majority that's showing up, but when it's kind of like this marginalized population, and how do we configure programming and the services a little bit differently? So I'd be happy to talk with anyone about that, and an additional conversation about what our journey has been and what our process has been.
That would be awesome. And Dr. Livingston, if you want to share your contact information, or I can send that out to everyone if they want to follow up with you. I know that there are many who would like to continue the conversation. Would love to have you come and talk more to folks here in Arkansas, because your story and your experiences are so relevant, not only just to encourage more the way we see the need to get a seat at the table, but how we, the environment that we are creating to ensure that everyone is included in the conversation, and that our actions, as the story you shared about the young lady being able to scoot down and add more room, I mean, that's so very powerful. It's a great example of what we all should be doing, no matter what it takes, and being able to give specific information to your idea. You had a concept, but someone had to be able to help you put that concept into action. And that's so important, that to help us look beyond the box, outside the box of what we should be doing to help be more inclusive in terms of self-employment. So thank you for sharing today. We'll share your contact information if others want to contact Dr. Livingston, continue the conversation, or have her share tools and resources with you locally.
Yes.
We're going to shift gears and go back to John Walsh and have a discussion about our sustainability plans.
Hello, everyone. So this morning I mentioned to you that I had a conversation with DJ Ralston. So we were talking about a couple of various topics. And one of the topics had also to do with sustainability. And so DJ was kind enough to offer to talk a little bit about what the sustainability, what their plan is for sustainability that's occurring with Virginia. And I know David and Yohance are also on the call as well, but it would be great if DJ could talk a little bit about that. The other piece I wanted to talk about, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to switch to DJ very quickly. But one of the pieces when we talk about sustainability is sometimes we also need to look at our interagency agreements that we have. So oftentimes they're mandated by the statutes, or sometimes they're regulatory, or sometimes they're needed to increase services for the folks we serve. But unfortunately, we spend a lot of time in drafting them and editing them, going through the approval processes, but sometimes we're not always using them to our advantage in actually getting services coordinated. And as you think about your sustainability plans in your states, you may want to dust off some of those interagency agreements and look at when they're coming up for renewal. And is this an opportunity to maybe add some facets of the work you've done in your state to become part of that document? And as we know, as those agreements start to form, that sets up a structure for how agencies can interact with one another. So I'm just going to be brief on that to allow DJ some additional time to talk about Virginia. But I would really encourage that. The other piece I would encourage you, if you need some examples of some language around some of the interagency agreements, the WinTAC website actually has some really good examples. And Robin, I'll send you a link that you could share with the rest of the COP that may be able to help you in this journey as you look at some of your agency agreements and see how this can benefit you in your sustainability efforts. But at this point, I want to turn it over to DJ.
Sure. Hi, John. Hi, everybody. So I will make this very brief because we have about just a few minutes left. But as with the world of COVID-19, we've had to dramatically retool our sustainability plan in Virginia. So originally, for those of you that are on the line that have been involved in your states and in these projects, we actually we're going to do a statewide rollout of the promising practices or the emerging practices that were found to be useful essentially in Virginia in our targeted communities. And so we had planned a rollout around the state in kind of a 2-day or like a two-part structure. So we were going to go to each region, do an overview day that was kind of the what and the why, and then come back 4 to 6 weeks later and do a training for folks that would be a couple of days, be really in depth and be this is how you do it essentially. So we had that scheduled around the state. We had leadership from the state of Virginia, commissioner, director level folks that were supportive of this, supportive of their staff participating. We had some good ideas around the community partners, et cetera, that were gonna participate. But because those initial 1-day overview trainings were aimed at having 80 to 100 people there, and those follow-up 2-day in-depth trainings were supposed to be cohorts of 30 to 60, given our current reality with COVID-19, that's not gonna happen. So we've gone back to the drawing board, and what we've decided to do, again, in partnership with state of Virginia leadership, is to, one, we're going to create a video that will actually, at least we're hopeful that we're going to create a video that will talk about the value of the project and the impact of the project from the perspective of multiple stakeholders in the project. So VR counselors, VR managers in local offices, district directors, community partners, both core partners under WIOA and community-based agencies and organizations, as well as state leadership, project staff. John Walsh, you don't know that yet, but that's you. And perhaps even our federal project officer. And part of the reason that we want to make this video is because we want it to live on as a legacy that looks at aligning the values and culture of what Virginia VR or Virginia DARS has, so that they can use it with their new hires as part of their onboarding process. Because we really feel like this project embodies what their culture is and what their desire is. And David can jump in and kind of speak to that as well in just a second. But the other thing that we're going to do is essentially we're going to create a cohort, and my colleague and I are going to basically teach a class over the span of 3 to 4 months. We have 4 units. Each unit will have 1 to 2 synchronous sessions involved in it. There will be assignments in between. We're currently working with Virginia DARS leadership to figure out kind of what the process for identifying who's going to participate in that. And then the other piece that we're working on is actually outsourcing a bit to our friends at CUNY around having a cohort of folks participate in some financial coaching certification services. So to Dr. Livingston's point, part of what we're hopeful we can embed within the expertise of vocational rehabilitation counselors is the whole piece around financial empowerment and understanding the financial pieces in the larger financial picture, in addition to personal financial literacy, but looking at how that impacts one's ability to start a business, along with anybody who's going to participate in any traditional demand side type of employment. So that's our goal. We're going to look at the intersection of disability and poverty. We're going to look at partnership development. We're going to look at the integrated resource team, and we'll look at the community financial empowerment pieces. So that's what will be covered in the context of that course. We don't have all of the details worked out. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. We're trying to figure that out. But David, was there anything you wanted to add in there?
We are so fortunate and excited for both the collaboration with everyone involved and where we're going moving forward. One of the things that's been very nice is, as DJ mentioned, the video that's going to be a part of this, we already have buy-in that it will become a mandatory viewing for all new counselors and a piece of our new counselor skills going forward. And that's so critical because as people come into the agency, we want them to have the mindset that collaborating across WIOA partners and community partners is a core value of the agency. And as DJ mentioned, the work we are embarking on with Dr. Moy from CUNY is really exciting, mainly because one of the other things we did relative to how the community academy work was done was look at opportunities for VR to participate around the state of Virginia with other partners who are doing work in financial empowerment. And in Virginia, 2 of our communities have Cities for Financial Empowerment grants. We were able to, through another project, put 1 staff through the financial coaching program for that grant in Roanoke. And one of the things we've worked out is that we will share space for their staff if our clients need in-depth financial coaching. We see it as a chance for a dual referral source, but the same project is about to happen in the city of Richmond. And if we can have staff going through that same training and better capitalize on sharing the resources and getting our clients back and forth, it will both increase the effectiveness of VR while reducing some of the burden for all of these pieces to fall on VR staff. And when we sent a few folks through that training earlier this month, we just had our debrief. Every one of them, we now have a monthly work group because of how strong that training was and what those staff want to see going forward. And our ability to do this with the city of Richmond should dramatically increase our referrals, as it has done in Martinsville and where Yohance is in Portsmouth and Southampton Roads. That's all I have.
Thanks, David. So we're super excited to move this forward in Virginia, and like I said, we don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but we definitely are conceptualizing it, and we're looking to implement probably going forward July, August, September to that rollout piece. So we'll hope to have our cohort in place in classes, quote unquote, starting sometime in July. So.
Sounds good. Keep us informed. Thank you, DJ. John Walsh had to get off for another meeting. So this concludes our communities of practice. Thank you again to everyone who participated. Just a heads up, our next meeting will be June 25th at 1 p.m. I'm going to do it a little differently. We'll have a registration link that we will send to you from UA Currents. And if you'll register there, that way we can keep track of the process for sending you the evaluation form, and then you'll be able to download your CRC certificate if you so choose to get that 1 hour of credit for participating. So thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Livingston, for being with us today, and John and DJ and everyone who shared and participated in today's communities of practice. Been really a great experience. Any final comments? Thank you again. Have a great week and great weekend. Happy Memorial Day to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Livingston. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.